Welcome to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection's Good Samaritan Application Training Module. By the end of this session, you will have gained an understanding of the process for developing an administratively and technically complete environmental Good Samaritan application for an abandoned oil or gas well plugging project. The Environmental Good Samaritan Act protects landowners, groups, and individuals who volunteer to do such projects from civil and environmental liability. This law is intended to encourage landowners and others to reclaim abandoned mineral extraction lands and abate water pollution caused by abandoned mines and oil or gas wells. DEP is currently accepting projects for protection under the Environmental Good Samaritan Act and will administer and review project proposals to determine project eligibility. Oil and gas development in Pennsylvania is extensive and has been ongoing for over 150 years. Regulatory standards for the industry have evolved significantly during this time period as a function of both advances in technology and more intense focus on environmental protection. Because oil and gas development had been taking place for nearly a century prior to permitting requirements enacted in 1955, it is estimated that hundreds of thousands of legacy wells are yet to be accounted for in the Commonwealth. If not addressed properly, wells have the potential to cause health, safety, or environmental concerns. DEP believes the provisions of the Environmental Good Samaritan Act represent one valuable tool for addressing legacy oil or gas wells for which there is no responsible party. This slide outlines the topics that will be covered in this training module. The components pertinent to the application content and review process all have a basis in the statute. In order to qualify for liability relief, it is important that they be appropriately addressed in the application. I will first review several important considerations an applicant must weigh prior to submission of the application. Following this, I will discuss Good Samaritan Project Inventory, which is maintained by DEP and required by law. Next, I will cover the different levels of review that DEP will complete. This includes both an administrative and technical review. Public notice represents a significant part of the Good Samaritan process and is accomplished using multiple means for communicating the details of the project proposal with stakeholders. This information also will be covered in the training session. Finally, I will conclude with actions that DEP may take at the conclusion of the review process and the specifics of what liability relief under Good Samaritan Act entails. Situations where an applicant wishes to commence a plugging project quickly may not be suitable for the Good Samaritan Act application process. The process involves a required 30-day public comment period, and DEP reviewers will need ample time to review the proposal, visit the site, and request supplemental application materials in certain cases. It is recommended that the applicant allow for somewhere between 60 and 90 days of lead time between application submission and the intended project commencement date. The applicant should consider engaging the appropriate DEP district office if it is anticipated that timing will be critical or there are unique aspects to the project, as this will place the agency in a better position to coordinate its review of the project proposal. Depending on the character of the site where the well is located, the applicant may need to secure DEP permits, and this will necessitate additional lead time. For example, stream crossing permits or submission of an erosion and sedimentation plan for DEP review may be needed. In general, most single well sites are small footprint sites that will not require any special permits or additional review. One other important thing to keep in mind is that many legacy wells are found on public lands, and so it's possible that coordination with land management agencies and any policies and requirements they may need to be adhered to. Plugging a well for which a responsible party exists may introduce liability and should be avoided in most circumstances. It can be safely assumed that any wells on DEP's orphan and abandoned list do not have a viable responsible party, and such wells make suitable candidates for Good Samaritan projects. For all other wells, applicants should either complete due diligence relating to well ownership or operating interest prior to submission of the application and include the necessary documentation along with submission package, or engage DEP to complete an abandoned well investigation before the Good Samaritan application is prepared in cases where well ownership or operating interest cannot be easily determined. No application should be submitted for wells without assigned API numbers unless agreed upon in advance by the DEP. By definition, well plugging projects are considered reclamation projects under the Good Samaritan Act. Section 8105F of the law describes the components of the project inventory. For oil and gas well plugging projects, these include details relating to the project location and boundaries, each landowner and person identified in the project plan, the results of DEP's review of the project proposal. DEP's oil and gas program maintains an inventory of environmental Good Samaritan projects on the PA Oil and Gas Mapping tool, accessible using the hyperlink on this slide. Previously submitted application materials are available for download from this tool, which may be useful as you look to complete your application. Please note, however, that the current application format has changed and the most recent version of the application should be downloaded from DEP's website for use. Environmental Good Samaritan projects can be visualized by selecting the project status in the PA Oil and Gas Mapping tool. Users may also search for a particular project by Environmental Good Samaritan or EGS ID. The Identify tool in the mapping application can be used to view attributes of the well and the Environmental Good Samaritan project and related documents. The EGS application materials can be downloaded by clicking on the Display Authorization Documents button. Well inspections and other documents may also be downloaded using this tool. Upon receipt of an application, DEP reviewers will confirm that it is administratively complete. Each application must include some background information about the applicant and a project description that details the objective of the proposal. The applicant should indicate what specific environmental concerns will be addressed through execution of the well plugging project. Background information on the well to be addressed should also be provided if known. Relevant details are described in the application instructions. Note that the form may accommodate up to 30 wells for a single project proposal. The applicant should develop either a map or a narrative description of the project location. If a map is provided, parcels that join the project parcel within a 2,500-foot distance and the location of the well should be indicated. All wells included as part of the project proposal must have assigned API numbers or US well numbers. If no API number is assigned, the responsible oil and gas district office should be contacted so that the DEP may complete an abandoned well investigation. This is a critical step as there is a chance that the well may have a responsible party associated with it who is required by law to permanently plug and abandon it. A list of contractors necessary to execute the proposal and the services they will provide should also be included in the application. It is critical that the well plugging contractors are qualified and have experience in Pennsylvania. DEP will consider this during the technical review, as it will be one indicator if the project can be successfully completed in accordance with the agency's applicable rules and regulations. The application must also include a list of the names and addresses of all landowners on whose property project wells are located. Other qualifying information about any landowners should also be provided. For example, is the landowner an individual or corporation? If the well is on the applicant's property, the applicant's mailing address should be included. The application should also list all project participants. Participants include entities eligible for liability relief because they help facilitate the project by providing equipment or services at cost or at no charge. As with landowners, other qualifying information about the project participants should also be provided in the application. A list of adjacent landowners and their mailing addresses should also be included with the application. DEP may need this information to send out certified notification mailings. The application form includes fields for parcel numbers and approximate distances from the project well location. Finally, proof of landowner access consent must be submitted as part of the application. DEP and all project participants must have access to the project property. The applicant may authorize this consent if they are the surface property owner. Access agreements for any properties that must be passed through to access a project site must also be submitted as part of the application. Landowners granting access are considered project participants if such access is freely given. Please note that neither lease agreements nor proof of oil and gas rights constitute proof of landowner access consent. During DEP's administrative review, the reviewer may determine that supplemental information is necessary to ensure that the application is administratively complete. In such cases, DEP will contact the applicant to request such information. Since Good Samaritan applicants are voluntarily addressing an environmental issue and have no legal or regulatory responsibilities to do so, they may use discretion regarding what aspects of the project they are going to address that extend beyond actual well plugging. For example, if historical releases of oil or brine have occurred at the well site, the applicant has no obligation to remediate those spills. Liability relief will only be granted for the specific components of the project in the application. It is important to note that if after commencement of the work, a spill or release occurs due to the applicant's activity or the activity of their contractor, it is the responsibility of the applicant to ensure that any environmental degradation that results is properly addressed by cleaning up the release to an approved remediation standard. Under no circumstances may an applicant discontinue a plugging project if the well has not first been stabilized to DEP satisfaction. This generally means that well plugging may not be discontinued unless the well is left in a condition that is equivalent or better than it was found in prior to the start of the project. Once the DEP reviewer has determined that the Good Samaritan application is administratively complete, the public notice process may commence. Provisions in the Good Samaritan law allow either DEP or the applicant to provide public notice by publishing a project description in a newspaper or general circulation for 4 consecutive weeks. In lieu of this, either DEP or the applicant may send certified letters to all adjacent landowners. Because well plugging projects generally consist of small footprint sites, only adjacent parcel owners within a 2,500-foot radial distance of the well location need be notified. In cases where no adjacent parcels are found within this distance, neither the certified mailings nor the newspaper publication are necessary. I will review examples of this concept in the next slide. If the applicant completes the certified mailings or publishes in a newspaper of local circulation, they must provide DEP with the date the last certified mailing is received or the date of the first newspaper publication, since this information may determine the close of the public comment period. As discussed previously, main oil and gas well plugging sites tend to be fairly small footprint sites. The Good Samaritan Act does require public notice in multiple formats, but in certain cases when a well is contained within a very large parcel and adjoining parcels are not found within a 2,500-foot radial distance, only the Pennsylvania Bulletin public notice is required. Example A shows a scenario where a 2,500-foot radial distance around the well site intersects three immediately adjoining parcels to the north, parcels A, B, and C. In this case, either the applicant or DEP would need to send certified letters to the landowners of parcels A, B, and C, or publish the project notice in a local newspaper for 4 consecutive weeks. Example B shows a scenario where a 2,500-foot radial distance around the well site does not intersect any adjoining parcels. In this case, no certified mailings or newspaper publication is required. In both examples, the landowner for parcel D, which contains the well that will be plugged, still must grant access to the applicant, project participants, any contractors, and DEP for the project to proceed and for liability protection to be available. DEP is responsible for publishing the project notice in the PA Bulletin. This will typically be done by the regional clerical staff. Notices under the Good Samaritan Act are submitted to the policy office as a special notice. The date associated with the letter of the 2 required notification elements, the PA Bulletin notice, and the receipt of the last certified letter or publication in newspaper of general circulation marks the commencement of the required 30-day public comment period. At the conclusion of the public comment period, DEP must assemble and provide all comments received to the application. Although no formal comment response document need be prepared by the agency, DEP will consider all public comments received in its decision about whether or not the project should qualify for liability relief under the Good Samaritan Act. DEP district technical staff will commence a technical review of the project proposal concurrent with the public notice process. Field visits are a required element of the technical review and will be coordinated with the applicant. DEP technical staff with experience providing oversight of well plugging projects will also assess whether or not the proposal will conform with regulations and laws pertinent to well plugging. These regulations and laws require certain plugging techniques depending on the well construction details and location and submission of a notice of intent to plug. Links to the relevant regulations and laws are provided in the slide. At the completion of the project, the applicant must submit a plugging certificate to the DEP. By the time DEP has commenced its technical review, applicants must either have already secured any additional necessary permits to execute the project or demonstrate that the permit applicant process has commenced. As discussed previously, supplemental permits or DEP project plan reviews are not common for well plugging projects. As a fundamental criterion, DEP technical staff will determine whether or not the project proposal will improve or at least maintain site conditions when executed. It should be emphasized that DEP technical staff are available and interested in working closely with applicants when projects are complicated or they need assistance identifying qualified contractors. The agency has a strong interest in working to cultivate interest in the program and the execution of technically sound projects. Once the technical review has been completed and the 30-day comment period closes, DEP has the option of either approving or denying the application for liability relief. In either scenario, the agency will communicate its decision to the applicant. The applicant will also receive copies of any comments submitted during the public comment period. Finally, DEP will send letters to any commentators informing them of the agency's decision on the project proposal and update the project inventory accordingly. In this section of the training module, I will review a few notes relating to the liability relief provided under the Good Samaritan Act. This information is specifically referenced in sections 8106 and 8107 of the statute. The applicant should be certain to let landowners know that liability relief extends to them when access consent is being sought. More specifically, landowners who provide access to the project area are free from any liability associated injury or damages to or caused by project participants during the execution of the project, or any injury or damages to any other person resulting from the execution of the project. Landowners are also free from any liability associated with pollution that results from the execution of the project. Participants listed in the application are not responsible for injury or damage that occurs on the project, pollution associated with water treatment facilities, or for operating, maintaining, or repairing water treatment facilities. Provided the applicant supplies the equipment, materials, or services necessary to execute the project at no charge or at cost, they will be afforded relief from civil liability and may reference the protections of the Good Samaritan Act in any legal proceedings concerning environmental law or imposing liability. It is important to note that there are limitations to the liability relief awarded by the Environmental Good Samaritan Act, particularly in cases where injury or damage is caused by recklessness, gross negligence, willful misconduct, or unlawful activities. A landowner charges an access fee or receives something of value for granting access, or where a contractor is executing the project for a profit. The exemption of any party from liability protection does not impact the liability protection awarded to other parties involved in the project. This slide provides hyperlinks to additional resources that may be useful for applicants. These resources include the statutory language, the Good Samaritan application instructions and forms specific to oil and gas well plugging project proposals, DEP's current inventory of Good Samaritan projects, exemplary Pennsylvania Bulletin language, and an example of certified mailing language used to notify adjacent landowners. This final slide provides a useful reference for the Good Samaritan application submission and review process. Applicant roles and responsibilities are shaded blue, and DEP oil and gas program staff roles and responsibilities are shaded green. Thank you for your time and attention to this training module. Please don't hesitate to contact any of the highlighted DEP district offices or the well plugging program in Harrisburg if you have any questions or require additional information about the Environmental Good Samaritan Act.